Once again, we find ourselves with a task that's in e-services, but not in the SUAS task guide. So we've got discussed the KP index, RFI, and EMI effects and mitigation techniques on UAS operations. So we got a lot of acronyms in this title, so I've scoured high and low and found another guest lecturer to talk to us a little bit about some of this gobbledygook. Hold on, I'm going to do this. Sorry.
It's a two-part series on electromagnetic compatibility, or EMC. To understand EMC, we need to introduce EMI, and we'll start by first talking about electromagnetic waves. What are electromagnetic waves? In the 19th century, Michael Faraday, Joseph Henry, and James Maxwell established that electrical and magnetic signals are linked. A changing magnetic field induces a changing electric field, and vice versa. These changing fields create electromagnetic waves. Electromagnetic energy is all around us, from 50 to 60 hertz electrical power to audible frequency and AM/FM radio. Microwaves, infrared, visible light, ultraviolet light, X-rays, and gamma rays are also different forms of electromagnetic waves. The electromagnetic spectrum distributes electromagnetic energy according to frequency and wavelength. High-speed switching of electrical and electronic devices can also generate electromagnetic signals. To understand what issues electromagnetic compatibility, or EMC, prevents, we'll need to look at two types of interference: radio frequency interference and electromagnetic interference. Radio frequency interference, or RFI, is when unwanted noise from 15 kHz to 1000 MHz causes issues due to electromagnetic energy. Electromagnetic interference, or EMI, is the term for when interference could come from any frequency, encompassing both radio and microwaves. EMI is a phenomenon that can range from a nuisance to a disaster, depending on what it impacts. For instance, interference with your television or radio may be bothersome but will not have much overall impact. On the other hand, interference with a pacemaker or other medical device could have devastating consequences. It's why EMC is so essential. At the turn of the century, this created a need for regulating EMI to safer limits, giving rise to electromagnetic compatibility requirements. Today's high-power, high-speed switching electronics, such as triacs, MOSFETs, or SCR, generate very high levels of unwanted electromagnetic signals. This is called electromagnetic noise, or simply noise. These unwanted signals can propagate to other electronic systems in the vicinity, causing nuisance, malfunction, or disruption. This is the electromagnetic interference, or EMI, phenomenon. EMI comes from both natural and man-made sources. Natural sources are beyond our control and include electrostatic discharge from a lightning strike or coronal mass ejection following large solar flares. Controlling man-made EMI is the focus of EMC. Two broad categories of man-made EMI sources are 1. Intentional and 2. Unintentional. Intentional sources require electromagnetic waves for their intended operation, such as cell phones, TV, and radio. These EM signals are necessary and can't be limited. The only way to mitigate their impact is by protecting other equipment from these. As an example, cell phone use is not allowed in many hospitals. Unintentional sources create undesired electromagnetic noise during their operation. These are major disruptors to other devices in the vicinity. The unintended sources include motors, electric appliances, inverters, rectifiers, treadmills, and others. The noise from these unintentional sources must be suppressed to ensure proper operation of other nearby devices. Let's define a few terms to close out the basics of EMI and RFI. What is a source? Electrical equipment generating and propagating the EMI or noise is called a source. Examples include cell phones, appliances, computers, treadmills, inverters, welding machines, etc. What is a receiver? Electrical equipment that receives unwanted noise signals, or EMI, is called a receiver. If the receiver gets adversely impacted by this EMI, it can also be called a victim. Cell phones, TVs, and computers can be a receiver as well as a source. Other receivers include electronic modules, medical equipment, and touch panels. What is coupling?
And SUASs. Oops.
Unintentional. Protecting other equipment from these. As an example, cell phone use is not allowed in many hospitals.
Oops, we're going to do.
These are major disruptors to other be suppressed to ensure proper operation of other nearby devices. Let's define a few terms to close out the basics of EMI and RFI. What is a source? Electrical equipment generating and propagating the EMI or noise is called a source. Examples include cell phones, appliances, computers, treadmills, inverters, welding machines, etc. What is a receiver? Electrical equipment that receives unwanted noise signals or EMI is called a receiver. If the receiver gets adversely impacted by this EMI, it can also be called a victim. Cell phones, TVs, and computers can be a receiver as well as a source. Other receivers include electronic modules, medical equipment, and touch panels. What is coupling? Coupling is the mechanism by which electromagnetic emissions interfere with other susceptible electrical equipment. EMI can propagate via two routes: conducted over electrical cables and power lines, or radiated over the air using the electrical wires, PCB traces, or component leads of transmitter and receiver antennas. Now that you understand the basics of EMI and RFI, check out our video EMC 102, What is EMC? To continue learning about this topic. Its link is in the description. Once you understand EMC design, you can minimize unwanted emissions, comply with all internal and external EMC regulations, and pass EMC compliance testing the first time. If your devices need compliance testing or supplies to reduce EMI issues, contact Astrodyne TDI for a custom quote today.
Okay, so while flying in SUAS, what are some of the electrical magnetic interference things that we might encounter? Anybody have one that comes to mind right away?
Cell phone towers.
Cell phone towers.
Radio communication, high tension lines.
Yep. And those are all specifically RFI, aren't they?
Yep.
All right. And so those are some of the man-made interferences that we're going to encounter. And then there's natural interference. The most important natural interference that we run into are solar flares, right? Because that's actually an EMI in and of itself, because it creates an electromagnetic interference along the what do you want to call it? The lines of the earth. And we call that the KP index. Okay. So once again, I've brought in another guest lecturer to talk to us a little bit about what that index is and how we rate it and what we do with it.
Hello, my name is Ben Lovegrove, and in this video I'm going to try to answer the question, what is the KP index? And I'll discuss what risks, if any, it might pose to operators of UAV. Some say that a high KP index reading is a risk to UAV flying, while others say the risks are negligible and therefore it can be safely ignored. So if you're a drone pilot and you would like to gain an appreciation of what this measurement means for your planned flights, then this video is for you. What follows is my understanding of the KP index, so if you notice any errors or omissions, feel free to correct me by posting a comment below. If you've flown drones during a high KP index reading and noticed even the slightest difference in GPS accuracy, then please post a comment too. Drones use GPS to calculate their position above the Earth. It's what makes them so easy to fly, and it's the GPS tracking that enables many of the features that make UAV both useful to commercial operators and fun to fly for amateurs. For example, within the DJI Phantom range, it's GPS programming that powers the failsafe, home lock and ground station features. That's all well and good, but what are the risks of losing satellite connection? One of the external forces that can reduce the satellite signal strength and cause a string of mishaps that might lead to the dreaded flyaway is a geomagnetic storm, and it's this aspect of space weather that is measured using the KP index. The KP index is a measurement of disturbances within the Earth's magnetic field. It represents these disturbances on a scale of 0 to 9. A reading of 1 to 4 confirms calm conditions, whereas 5 to 9 denotes a magnetic storm of increasing degrees of intensity. The readings are displayed in 3-hour intervals, usually as a graph in green, yellow and red. The measurements of disturbances are collected by magnetometers at various locations around the globe and recorded into their respective K index. The global KP index is a curation of all this data based on the average from each recording station's K index. The disturbances in the field are caused by solar flares, so increased solar activity poses a risk to any GPS equipment. When the index is in the green area, 0 to 3 on the scale, there's a good chance of strong satellite lock. When it goes over 3 and stronger, then there is a risk of disruption to satellite connectivity. Anything above 5 indicates a magnetic storm of increasing strength. So the theory goes that if your drone has locked onto 12 satellites, but a solar storm causes disturbances in the Earth's magnetic field, you may lose the connection to one or more. The accuracy of the GPS may be affected too, but again, some say this is too small a risk to worry about. Judging by the comments on forums, it seems many believe it's not worth any concern. However, latitude of the drone flight and the type of drone itself may be significant. Some drone pilots report that the closer you get to the North or South Pole, then the lower the safety threshold on the index. Another reported that it never has any effect on the satellite lock when flying his DJI Mavic, but his Phantom was susceptible. So it seems from anecdotal evidence that the risks are very low, but it's not an outright myth. If you have experienced any variation in satellite lock during a high KP index reading, then please describe it below, stating the drone you flew and in which country. Finally, if you want to see the Aurora Borealis or Northern Lights, or Aurora Australis or Southern Lights, then a high KP index reading is desirable. Thanks for watching. If you found anything of interest in this video, then please subscribe to my channel by clicking the red
Okay, and I know, as you know, we never go into the click and subscribe part of the videos. So that's the KP index. Couple of things. CAP is of the school of thought that it is important, and we want to make sure that we take a look at it. And that's why when you take a look at the ORM, it is broken down exactly as the gentleman described it in the video. We have 0 to 3, we have 4 to 6, and then we have 7 or higher. And so we want to take that precaution because, again, do you want to be the one that tells Colonel Bomer that the KP index is what is the reason why you lost control of the bird? I don't. Okay. Any questions in regards to the KP index?
So if it's above 4, you don't fly. Am I correct?
If it's above 6.
If it's above 6, you don't fly.
All right.
But if you take a look at the ORM, 4, 5, and 6 gives you a high risk number on your ORM.
And 6, 7, 8, 9, or anything above 6 will give you a no fly.
All right, thank you.
Just like on the ORM, if you check it and you don't have cell phone or radios, you have no communication, you don't fly. If you don't have reflective vests, you don't fly.
Yep.
There are several items on there that are just, if you don't have it, it's a no fly.
So,
Okay.
And everybody is very well versed with the ORM form, right?
Getting there.
Getting there. That's okay. Getting there is good too. Yeah, we've gone over it a couple of times.
Soon you guys will all have lots of experience because you're going to have to fill it out 5 separate times at least.
Yep.
The question for you, Colonel and or Captain, this is just more for completionist sake. Is the reason why anything above a KP index score of 6 is the reason why it's a no fly just because of how high of a chance is for radio interference?
Yep.
Okay, just
Yep, absolutely. It's the drones we've been flying have relied solely on GPS. The Skydios rely on both GPS and visual, so they have a backup system, but we still won't fly those without GPS. Well, I mean, with a high KP index.
makes sense. I just wanted to make sure.
Yep, no, that's the reason.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. I think that covers it. I mean, as I said, it's not you know, for the last couple of weeks, you guys have been asking me what's the KP index. It's not a great formula. It's just knowing what it is. It's talking about that electromagnetic interference and making sure that again, we always make sure that we are looking at risks and how to avoid them.
I've got one question. Does the KP indicate the value at the present time? I know there's some websites where you can look at and you can get a forecast of magnetic storms from the sun like a day or so in advance. And I didn't know whether it's instantaneous or whether it's part of a forecast.
Good question. If you take a look at that UAV forecast that I gave you, it can actually forecast at least 24 to 48 hours in advance what it believes the KP index is going to be in the future. And but whatever you are seeing, if it's set to right now, it's giving you the KP index for right now. But you'll see that for example, I pulled up one day and it was like, okay, if I'm not flying in the next 25 minutes, I'm not going to fly for the rest of the day because I was in red. And exactly like Major Burrow was showing us there on his phone. So that's what it is. We set that KP index to I set it to 5. If I get even a 5, I'm not going to take the risk of flying just to be safe.
A question for you, because I'm looking at that UAV forecast, and this gets back to, I think we talked about it yesterday or something. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking, there's a period of time in my area tomorrow that the KP index is 1, but the locked visible satellites are like 13 and 12, but then this estimated satellites locked, which it looks like is just some function of the 2 KP invisible satellites, and they're like 11.8, 11.3, and they say good to fly, no. Now, right. What, our ORM form, just if I put in KP of 1, that would be a good day to fly.
It would be. You're absolutely right. So according to the ORM, we can't put everything down because it can get into, you can just go way into minutia on all of it. So that's our standard. If you're uncomfortable because of your experience or what you've been taught, then don't fly. What I would tell you is, most cases, even with a higher KP index, if you're flying not far away, if you're flying fairly close to where you are, you're not going 200 or 300 yards away or further, you're probably going to be safe. Watch your lock when you get up. Do your basic maneuvers to make sure that your aircraft is working right. Check your GPS lock. Is it good? Is it not good? On the Skydio, sometimes, and we experienced this when I was in Copper Country, we'd fly it up and we'd have weak GPS, but we moved it over to the left or the right, and all of a sudden we got great GPS. So, and we had to do that when I was in Indiana also. Sometimes you just have to move it. So yeah,
You're going to find that the KP index is what we use. We as we were discussing, we don't look at the satellites locked, but it's a measurement for you to look at. If I've got a KP index of 3, but I'm locked into 20 satellites, I'm going to feel a lot safer than if I've got a KP index of 1, but I'm only locked into 11 satellites, right? Because if I lose those satellites, there's the possibility that I'm going to lose my GPS. The more satellites we have locked on, the better we're going to be able to coordinate and show that we can that we're going to maintain that stability. And so the KP index is what interferes with that satellite lock. So the higher, the more satellites you get, the less chances that it might occur. But at the end of the day, it does become your call, like Colonel Bulmer said.
And I've got a question. In aviation, we use GPS RAM check, integrity monitoring. Is that the same thing based on KP index, or can we use the RAM instead of simply KP index to decide if we can fly the drone?
You have to use the KP index for the ORM, but you can use the RAM to either confirm or to deny that KP index and to make a final decision. Because ultimately you're the one in charge.
Okay.
And I will tell you, Michigan Wings, we're not going to ask for, and we're not going to require anyone to use a stricter requirement for flying than what National Headquarters uses.
Right.